Welcome to this video lesson on the same origin policy. In this video, we will see how the same origin policy works and how it prevents a JavaScript running on a given origin from interacting with a document belonging to a different origin. Let us see some world cases that will help us better understand how the same origin policy works. Let's start by opening the web page at the following address, http://a.elssop.site. This is the first page where we are going to perform our first test. It is a very simple page with an iframe. If we inspect the code, we can see that it creates an iframe and tries to load the resources at this address, http://a.elssop.site/page1. The page1.html file is a simple page that contains the following code. If we go back to the index source code, we can see that the origin of this document is defined by the following elements: protocol, HTTP, domain, a.elssop.site. Since the port is not specified, the default port will be used. This means that the port is 80. As you can see, the origin is the same as the index page. Indeed, we have HTTP as protocol, a.elssop.com as domain, and 80 as port. What we are going to try now is to use a small JavaScript that tries to edit the content of the iframe. To achieve this, we have to create another page, named test1.html. Here we have the same iframe as the previous page, plus a button. Let us inspect the source code of this page and see what this button does. As we can see, this is the button that calls the JavaScript function testsop. If we inspect its code, we can see that in order to edit the content of the iframe, we're going to change its inner HTML property. The statement sets the content of the frame, 0, to content changed. If it does not work, we will print an alert with the error message. Now we can go back into our web browser and test it. Note that it is stored in the same folder as our previous index.html page. Let's click on the button and see what happened. Great, it worked, and the content of the iframe changes. This is, of course, permitted, since the two documents test1.html and page1.html share the same origin. Let us now see an example where the two documents do not share the same origin, and see what happens. The page we're going to use is still on the a.elssop.site domain, and it is called test2.html. This time we have two iframes. The one on the left is the same one we saw in the previous example, while the one on the right is a bit different. Here indeed, the iframe loaded a document from a different domain, which is b.elssop.site. Note that this is a different domain since there is a b. Let's inspect its code to see what's in there. Here's the code of the second iframe. As we can see, it loads the document page2.html from the domain b.elssop.site. The new button calls the JavaScript function named testsop2, which is very similar to the code we saw before. But this time, we try to edit the second iframe. Now that we know the code behind the page, let us go back into the web browser and test it. Of course, the first test works, since once again, the two documents share the same origin. Now, let's try the second button. As we can see, an alert appears and it displays the following security error message. This happens because the two documents do not share the same origin. Thus, the JavaScript cannot edit its content. Therefore, the same origin policy is working fine. What we want to see and test now is one of the few exceptions to the same origin policy that applies to the object named location. To do this, let us open the page test3.html, which is still stored in the domain a.elssop.site. Here, we have 4 iframes and 4 buttons. In the first 2 iframes, we are loading the document page1, which is in the same domain as the current document. Therefore, we should be able to get or set the location object via JavaScript. The other 2 iframes load the document page2.html, which is stored on a different domain. More precisely, it is loaded from the domain b.elssop.site. Here again we have 2 buttons, one for setting the location via JavaScript and one for getting its value. You should know that when taking into account the location object, there is an exception in same origin policy. Indeed, even if two documents do not share the same origin, a document can always set the location property, but it cannot get it. Let us demonstrate this in the following page. First, let us see what happens when we share the same origin with the included document. If we click on the first button, we can see that the location is successfully set. Indeed, the page at the address www.elsfoo.com is loaded. Let's see what happens if we try to get the location property. Here again, it is working, and it's supposed to since we share the same origin. Let's now run some tests to documents that do not share the same origin. Once again, we are able to set the location. But if we try to get the location, we can see that a security error is raised. The operation has been blocked since the origin is different. Now we know something more about the same origin policy. We want to verify what happens if the document included via the iframe wants to change the content of the page that loads it. To test this, let us open the page test4.html. Similarly to the previous examples, we have an iframe that loads the document named good.html. Note that the two documents share the same origin. Let us now inspect the JavaScript in the good.html file. Here we have the string printed on the screen and right after the button that will call our test JavaScript. This time, the JavaScript function will try to gain access to the parent document and then will try to edit its content. So differently from the previous examples, this time the document is within the iframe to contain the JavaScript function that edits the parent content. Now that we know the code behind the page, let us go back in our web browser and test the function. As we can see, since the two documents share the same origin, the JavaScript is allowed to change the parent content. Let us now see what happens if we try the same thing with two documents belonging to two different origins. So let us open the page test5.html. This time, we are loading the file named evil.html, which is stored in the domain b.elssop.site. The JavaScript code within this file is the same, so we can directly test it by clicking on the button. As supposed, a security error is raised, meaning that the JavaScript is not able to change the parent document content. This means that the same origin policy has been enforced. The last example we want to test is about another same origin policy exception. This exception applies on third-level domains only. Let us open the test6 page on the domain a.elssop.site and inspect it. As usual, here we have an iframe that loads a document stored on the domain b.elssop.site. As we already know, since the two documents are two different domains, we cannot get the location property. Indeed, if we try to get the location of the domain.html document from the parent document, we have a security error. The same happens on the reverse. If we try to get the location property of the parent document from the domain.html JavaScript, we get a security error too. Since both documents are in the third-level domain, they can set the document.domain object to the same second domain level, which in this case must be elssop.site. If we inspect the code of the test6.html page, we can see that there is a JavaScript function associated with the Change Domain button, which sets the domain to elssop.site. The same function is present on the domain.html page too. Here indeed, the function sets the document.domain to elssop.site. So let us go back into our web browser and click on these two buttons. Once we do this, both documents have the document.domain property set with the same value. What happens is that they now have the same origin. Indeed, if we try to get the location property by clicking on the button, we can see that we are able to read the iframe location property. The same works on the iframe too. Here indeed, we can see the location of the parent document. Note that this works only if the new domain value is within the same second-level domain, which means that we cannot set a different domain such as test.site. And this concludes our video lesson on the same origin policy. Thanks very much for joining us.